The term Western terrorism is deeply complex and inherently controversial. It demands careful consideration, going beyond simplistic definitions or politically charged rhetoric. This essay delves into the heart of this contentious concept, exploring its historical context, examining specific examples, and analyzing the perspectives that shape its understanding. The aim is not to offer easy answers or fuel existing divisions. Rather, it seeks to provide a nuanced and balanced analysis of a term often shrouded in misinformation and emotional charge. By unmasking the layers of complexity surrounding Western terrorism, we can begin to grapple with its implications and work towards a more just and equitable world. This exploration will take us from the corridors of power to the lived experiences of those most affected by violence and oppression. It will challenge us to confront uncomfortable truths about the West's historical and contemporary role in global affairs. Ultimately, it is through open and honest dialogue that we can move beyond the rhetoric and towards a future where peace and justice prevail. The first step in this journey is to define the term itself. What exactly do we mean when we speak of Western terrorism? Defining Western terrorism is a fraught exercise akin to navigating a conceptual minefield. The term itself is inherently subjective, often used as a rhetorical tool to critique the actions of Western governments and their allies. There is no universally accepted definition, and its meaning is often contested and politically charged. At its core, Western terrorism typically refers to acts of violence or intimidation perpetrated by individuals or groups associated with Western countries, particularly when those acts are perceived as being motivated by political or ideological goals. This can include state-sponsored terrorism, where governments directly or indirectly support terrorist activities, as well as acts carried out by non-state actors that align with Western interests or ideologies. However, the very act of defining terrorism is inherently problematic. One person's terrorist is often another's freedom fighter. The line between legitimate resistance and terrorism is often blurred, with perceptions shaped by power dynamics, historical context, and media narratives. Moreover, the term Western terrorism can be criticized for its potential to perpetuate a binary worldview, pitting the West against the rest. It risks essentializing complex geopolitical realities and overlooking the diversity of perspectives within and across different cultures and societies. To understand the complexities of Western terrorism, it is crucial to examine its historical context. Throughout history, Western powers have engaged in acts of violence and oppression that have shaped global power structures and fueled resentment and resistance. From the colonial conquests of the past to contemporary military interventions, the West's legacy is intertwined with the use of force to achieve political and economic dominance. This history of imperialism, colonialism, and neo-colonialism has left an indelible mark on the world, shaping perceptions of the West and its actions. Examples abound, from the transatlantic slave trade and the brutal subjugation of indigenous populations to the Cold War proxy wars and the ongoing war on terror. These historical events demonstrate how Western powers have often prioritized their own interests over the rights and well-being of others, using violence and coercion as tools of control and domination. This historical context is essential for understanding why the term Western terrorism resonates with many people around the world. It reflects a deep-seated anger and frustration with the West's historical and contemporary role in perpetuating violence and injustice. The ongoing situation in West Papua provides a stark illustration of the complexities surrounding Western terrorism. Since Indonesia's annexation of the region in 1969, the indigenous Papuan people have faced systematic discrimination, human rights abuses, and a brutal campaign of repression. Despite widespread condemnation from international human rights organizations, the Indonesian government has consistently denied any wrongdoing and restricted access to independent observers. This lack of transparency has made it difficult to assess the full extent of the violence and human rights violations occurring in West Papua. However, reports from credible sources paint a grim picture. Extrajudicial killings, torture, arbitrary arrests, and restrictions on freedom of expression and assembly are commonplace. The Indonesian government has deployed a heavy military presence in the region, and security forces operate with impunity, often targeting peaceful protesters and activists. The situation in West Papua is further complicated by the role of Western powers, particularly the United States and Australia. These countries have provided military aid and diplomatic support to Indonesia, despite its human rights record. This support has been seen by many as tacit approval of Indonesia's actions in West Papua, raising questions about Western complicity in the ongoing repression. Section 5. The Global War on Muslims, Myth or Reality? The concept of a global war on Muslims has gained traction, especially after 9/11 and the War on Terror. Some argue it's driven by Islamophobia and a desire to control Muslim-majority countries. They cite disproportionate targeting in counter-terrorism operations and rising Islamophobic rhetoric. Critics say this narrative oversimplifies and misleads. They argue the war on terror was a response to real threats, not a war on a religion. Section 6. Omar El-Akkad's One Day, Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This, a scathing critique. Omar El-Akkad's novel explores Western hypocrisy and complicity through a dystopian narrative of climate change and political turmoil. The story follows X, fleeing a flooded Louisiana to a fortified state resembling Israel, facing racism and violence. El-Akkad's writing is a searing indictment of Western double standards and selective empathy. One Day, Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This is essential reading, challenging us to confront uncomfortable truths. Section 7. Western Hypocrisy on Gaza, a Case Study. The ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, particularly the situation in Gaza, provides a stark example of Western hypocrisy and the double standards often applied when it comes to condemning violence and upholding human rights. The plight of the Palestinian people, particularly those living under Israeli blockade in Gaza, has been well documented by human rights organizations and international bodies. Yet, despite widespread condemnation of Israel's actions, Western powers, particularly the United States, have consistently provided diplomatic cover and military aid to Israel, effectively shielding it from accountability. This unwavering support, often framed in terms of shared values and security interests, stands in stark contrast to the West's condemnation of violence and human rights abuses elsewhere in the world. This double standard has fueled accusations of hypocrisy and undermined the West's moral authority on the world stage. Furthermore, the West's historical role in the creation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, particularly through its support for the Zionist movement and its failure to adequately address the plight of Palestinian refugees, adds another layer of complexity to the issue. This historical context further underscores the accusations of hypocrisy and complicity leveled against the West. Section 8. Balancing Perspectives. Understanding Complexities. Navigating the complexities of Western terrorism requires a nuanced and balanced approach, one that acknowledges the multifaceted nature of the issue and avoids simplistic narratives or sweeping generalizations. It is essential to engage with diverse perspectives, even those we may find uncomfortable or challenging, in order to foster meaningful dialogue and understanding. While it is crucial to acknowledge and condemn acts of violence and oppression perpetrated by Western actors, it is equally important to avoid essentializing the West or depicting it as a monolithic entity. The West is not a homogeneous bloc, and within Western societies, there is a wide spectrum of views and values. Moreover, it is crucial to recognize that terrorism and violence are not unique to any one culture, religion, or region. Attributing these acts solely to the West risks perpetuating harmful stereotypes and ignoring the global nature of these challenges. Ultimately, understanding Western terrorism requires a nuanced and historically informed perspective that acknowledges the complexities of power, identity, and violence in the 21st century. Section 9. Conclusion. Towards a more just future. Unmasking Western terrorism is not about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It is about engaging in a critical and honest examination of the West's role in the world and its impact on others. It is about acknowledging past wrongs and present-day injustices and working to create a more equitable and just future for all. This requires a fundamental shift in perspective, one that moves beyond narrow self-interest and embraces a more inclusive and interconnected view of humanity. It demands a commitment to dialogue, understanding, and empathy, even when it is difficult. It requires us to challenge our own biases and assumptions and to listen to the voices of those who have been marginalized and silenced. Ultimately, the path to a more peaceful and just world lies in our collective willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, to learn from our mistakes, and to work together to create a future where all people are treated with dignity and respect.